to sustainable development and use of landscapes and creating livelihoods. These are very seemingly disparate sets of issues in our economies, but actually they're totally linked. You can't have sustainable livelihoods unless you have sustained landscapes that are productive, that provide jobs, that provide also the goods and services that people need to maintain a decent, even if very simple life. So I guess I'm here really because this is really what I work on professionally, and I've had a long-standing relationship with the organizations that are essentially organizing it. I belong in a sense to that network of organizations, which includes my own Development Alternatives, AD, and all that. So they probably figured that I'm the most neutral person around, and I would be able to carry the conversation with you. I won't be speaking much just now, if there is a little time later on, but because of my 30 years of work in this field, I obviously have some opinions, so I may have a chance to share with you. Unfortunately, just to finish my introduction, I am double booked, and so I'm supposed to be in another meeting at the same time. So the way we're going to handle this is that I'm going to give the first half, go to the other one, which is planetary boundaries, my other area of concern, for the second half, meaning, and I hope you will excuse me. We are going to have a very interactive session based on real field experience, real work on the ground, no theory, just real feedback from what works and what doesn't work. And the first presentation title is Landscapes and Livelihoods. And I'm going to invite Chris Buss and Stuart McGuinness of IUCN to present.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ashok. And I sort of think we're quite privileged to have the current president of IUCN introducing it, and also the future president of IUCN for hopefully debating forests and poverty beforehand. And thank you for those who are staying on. Just one thing before I start my presentation, though we started up with an IUCN Livelihood Landscape Strategy slide. This session isn't an IUCN session, it's a multi-partner session that's being presented from lots of perspectives of a lot of interesting organisations who are involved in poverty and conservation. So I'm just going to give 10 minutes and really touch on some of the things that we've been working on over the last 5 years. The Livelihood Landscape Strategy, as you can see here, is a very large initiative that we've had at IUCN have been supporting, funded by DGIS of the Netherlands, and it's been going for 5 years. And out of that, we've had a lot of outcomes from the 5 years. Working with numerous partners and in 27 landscapes across 23 countries. So it's a vast pool of knowledge that we've been able to acquire over the last 5 years. And it's aimed at the bottom there really to deliver environmentally friendly, financially sustainable and social equitable outcomes that promote productive landscapes. And that's been one of the critical things that's been at the heart of what we've been looking at and working on. And I hope this presentation over the next 7 or 8 minutes just perhaps highlights some of those things. And I think one of the things, just to clarify what the strategy and the initiative was doing, was testing theories, looking at actions and learning on the ground and from our activities that we were doing. And it wasn't a new project or program, it was very much integrated into IUCN's work that we were already existing on. and also, like, for example, 60 partners. So it wasn't starting from a new, building on existing work. The four themes that we worked on were based on the theory of looking at productive landscapes and looking at the dependency, livelihood dependency, and the livelihood reliance of forest landscapes that the local people had. And it was this theory behind those themes that we really looked at to look at forest governance, markets and incentives, poverty reduction, and landscape transformation through activity negotiation and policy influence. Obviously with this session I'm going to focus on more of the poverty aspects and just give you some very, very brief examples of some of the findings that were coming out and some of the examples of where we had impact. One of the key things that we were working on was using tools and looking at the rights, locally controlled forest restoration, and income generating activities. And one of the key tools behind that we used was the Forestry Poverty Toolkit, which was supported mainly with the support of Profor. And this was a tool to look at interventions, but it was also a tool to give us analysis that we could draw out and look at some of the key fundamental issues that were developing throughout our landscapes. And one of the key things that we found was the forest reliance. The landscapes we worked on, and this will be reinforced through other of the presentations, is about 25 to 30% of annual income of rural populations. And it's changing the thinking of how people are approaching and governments are approaching forests. And its cash income is quite minor compared to the direct consumption, non-cash income that it provides. And that's really a key fundamental issue that we have to deal with when developing national policies and how governments are actually driving forward the forestry agenda in their countries. And just to give you an example of some of the work that we did using the Forestry Poverty Toolkit in Uganda, going through the 2 or 3 villages that we worked in and equating that up to a value of the forest to rural people, it comes to over $4 billion a year. And if you take that to an international level and looking at the 1.5 billion people who rely on 25 to 30% of the world forest, this gives you a global estimation of 130 billion a year. And that's with just cash and non-cash income. And if you take in other services, that can go up to 720 billion a year. And then those figures at the bottom just give you some idea of how much that is worth for every household and how much is used domestically. And whilst those figures may not look substantial to us, to rural income, that's a substantial amount additionality to people's income. And then also through the Forest Poverty Toolkit, and there's multiple examples of this graph that I could use, but I just want to show you this one from Burkina Faso, where a lot of the income comes from agriculture, and through the wealth categorisation of the local communities, you can see that from 12 o'clock probably around to 5 o'clock is the forest income, whether it be cash or non-cash. And that with wealthy people is less than if you look at the poor people and very poor men and women in the village. And their reliance on forest resources comes from, you can probably see, goes around from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So as the further down from the categorisation of wealth, people rely much more on their forest resource. And this was done by wealth categories, but we also did it from a spatial analysis and distance from the markets, and also by gender as well. And each 3 of those are different categories that people who are involved in could probably spend half an hour discussing. But with the 10 minutes, it's just to try and give you an example of where the variations in reliance on forest resources come from. And also, I think I just slip in this photo because it's sort of one of my favourite stories. Having lived in Malawi for 4 years, I noticed that on the BBC News every 2 years they stick out a story and say the poor Malawians are starving because they're selling mice by the side of the road. Well, actually, it's a snack and a delicacy that people driving along the road, people driving along the road will stop and eat. So the assumption is that it's being used as a safety net. But actually, that last photo is that it's not. It's part of people's income, a source of people's income, and it's a regular part. But actually, it gets a misconception that when they're using forest resources, it actually is part of a safety mechanism and reaction to drought. And then also there's a breakdown of a lot of key things that came out from our landscapes and using the toolkit. The categories for both cash and non-cash is used throughout the year. It's a consistent source. I think the supply and the demonstration of that last slide of the mice show that it is a constant supply and use. And also the different usage between men and women is critical. That women tend to use low forest products and men specific high value products. And then just a couple of examples of some interventions that we had. And one of the key things that came out, one of the learnings that came out is through very small interventions we can have substantial impact. In Brazil, investment into community organisation, access to process and marketing increased around forest products twofold, fourfold, or just a specific figure of $5,000 spread across 2,400 households. Doesn't mean that was just going across one household. There was different variations of increase depending on their work with those products. And then in Laos, just by setting in more specific community management techniques and practices, there was a decrease in felling of the malva tree on a substantial level of income. In actual fact, you'll be able to have a more specific discussion. I'm already putting in the 1 minute plug for the dating after this. And then just some of the key conclusions that are coming out from the livelihood landscape strategy is the value of forest, and it's consistently underrated and really needs to be integrated into national level accounts and statistics to include forest valuation from a poverty perspective. And what is that valuation? Forest, I've been to recent international meetings where we've been designing international resource assessments, and forests are still measured in the amount of timber that they provide and the income from the timber, and it's not a consideration of the poverty and how that can be interlinked. And then just to move on to just a couple of final slides, and I think we just want to stay this one as we are at the IUCN World Conservation Congress, of some of the impacts, and perhaps we should have put this one up right at the beginning when everyone was leaving the presidential debate, because the lessons from the livelihood landscape strategy have really influenced the 2013-2016 IUCN programme, particularly the human dependency on nature and natural resource governance framework, which are key fundamental work that the livelihood landscape work has been doing around is providing and looking at the links between conservation and poverty. And it's really now integrated into IUCN's programme. So I've had the slide to finish. It's 10 minutes is a very, very short time to even give you a taster of livelihood landscapes. But there is plenty of, there's 3 or 4 sessions in this room, and I can see even more people who have been involved in livelihood landscapes over the last 5 years who will be here to also discuss afterwards. And this last final slide is actually we've finally finished some of the publications, and Daniel will be bringing them down at the front and also be launched. But I think a lot of this I've just presented is integral behind it. So Ashok, I shall finish. And over to you.
Thank you. These are probably important issues. I hate to request you to time, but given the clock, we are actually not going to be able to finish the agenda. next three speakers really are given 2 minutes, and I'm going to have to split them to the next presentation is the Equator Initiative, and I would like to invite all the Hughes community to present.
Introduction. My name is Livelihoods from the UNEP Equator Initiative. For those who don't know anything about the Equator Initiative, we were founded in 2002. We bring together UN and civil society organizations in a broad partnership. And the thing we do that most of you might know is the Equator Prize, which is awarded every 2 years to local sustainable development solutions for people, nature, and resilient communities. Great, thanks. So I'm going to present the findings of research that we conducted into the work of the prize winners. That was my background. We've awarded 6 prizes since 2002. In 2010, the map of Equator Prize winners looked like this. There were 127 winners in 49 countries spread through the equatorial belt. And in 2010, the Equator Initiative set out to really fill a gap in our own knowledge management work and start to tap the wealth of potential in each of these prize winners. Unique stories on the successes and challenges of local sustainable development. Essentially, they're good practice cases, and we wanted to better profile the work that they've done. So over the last 2 years, we've gone back and forwards with the organizations themselves to come up with detailed case studies, and this is one of them. You'll have to take my word for it. There are 126 more that look just like this, and we're going to launch them at Hyderabad, the top 11, in a searchable online database. That work has informed a publication, a parable collection, and this essentially summarizes trends we identified across the case studies. This is really some initial findings to help validate the initial hypothesis behind the Equator Initiative in 2002, which is that there were these examples of local solutions for environmental development. And it's worth stating that not all of these lessons are necessarily new. We're adding weight to arguments that have been made before in some cases. But we believe that Equator Prize winners do offer a unique perspective on many of these issues. So this will also be formally launched in Hyderabad alongside the database, and each of the examples in the book will be hyperlinked to the individual case studies. So giving you really the breadth and the depth of Equator Prize experience. So briefly, before I go on to the findings, we identified about 12 findings. This is just to show quickly who wins the Equator Prize. Mostly community-based organizations, many indigenous groups, women's groups, community enterprises. We've also got larger producer groups or federations, NGOs or intermediary support organizations, and in some cases state-sponsored programs in which local communities are driving the work that's being done. And then very quickly, I'm sure you can't read this, but going down the top 5, these are fields of work for Equator Prize winners: protected area management, sustainable forestry, environmental education, eco-enterprises, land rights, ecotourism is up there, of course. So to go into the findings, lesson 1 was that local collective action provides a unique lens on sustainable development. The conditions that catalyze local collective action serve as a barometer of the needs of the world's most vulnerable populations. They can help to elucidate demand trends for development support. Some of the findings are listed. One of the less surprising ones: extractive industries don't work that well for local people. Service gaps and failures, lack of legal empowerment, regulatory vacuums, political marginalization. It's not all negative. We also found that what also motivates collective action is often opportunities, so identifying new markets or, say, taking advantage of certification schemes. There's a lot to be learned from looking at the catalysts for collective action on the margins. Lesson number 2 is that the social strand must come first. Now, this refers to the social strand of sustainable development. And we're not just saying that it's as important as the environmental and economic. We're saying that looking at Equator Prize winners, local groups realize that in order to realize economic and environmental benefits, you have to prioritize the social processes. There's a sequencing aspect here. You need to get social conditions right, everything else will follow. And in practice, what this means is things like conflict resolution, community empowerment, fostering group independence, self-reliance, and ultimately agency. Inclusion is an important aspect of that too. Lesson number 3 is that action for the environment will often produce development gains. Now, there's not much new about that. We've detailed some of the many ways in which we've seen this, building local green economies, redefining the productivity of ecosystems. I pick out stimulating investments in local infrastructure. These successful initiatives can often have spillover benefits in terms of investments in roads, schools, health infrastructure. Moving along, lesson 4 is that community empowerment enhances conservation efforts. So this is saying that as well as the normative argument that conservation should enhance local well-being, this is really saying that local ownership and empowerment means conservation is done better. So it's not just more equitable, but it's also more efficient and it's also more sustainable. There are a variety of ways in which doing conservation of the tasks that are on the screen, like monitoring of key species, invasive species eradication, management of protected areas, preservation of genetic diversity,